Hello and welcome to this brand new episode of The Cover, a show where we share a sneak peek of the latest Business Today magazine with all our viewers. I'm Sakshi Batra, and with me on the show I have Mr. Anand Adhikari, Managing Editor of Business Today magazine. Joining in also is Binu Paul, Senior Assistant Editor, and also correspondent Rajat Mishra joins right in. Welcome to all of you on this new episode. I'm really excited about what we can expect in the upcoming issue. So let me start off with you, Anand. What's going to be on the cover this time? What can readers really expect? Break all that surprise for all of us.
So, Sakshi, this time we have done a story on UPI, this unified payment interface, which is fast emerging, as a payment mode for both people and the merchant. And let me share some, statistics. In a matter of just 6 years, UPI is now commanding a market share of almost 16%. And if you look at the last, July-August figures, UPI is, clocking 6 billion transactions every month. And if you take that as a run rate of 10 to 12 lakh in value term, UPI is going to grow in 2023 by almost 50%. And the kind of target, this NPCI have set, they are now targeting 1 billion transaction a day. Now, if I take 1 billion transaction a day, that is going to, maybe we'll have some 550, 600 lakh crore of, retail payments. And
Right.
even today, universe of retail payment is around 556, 100 lakh crore.
Wow.
So it's going to completely dominate, the card payments, the NEFT, and it's going to be a mode of payment for you, me, and everybody. In the future.
Absolutely.
And just to build on it, the kind of expansion we are going to see, Sakshi,
Yes.
going forward. When we are analyzing the the UPI payments, P2P, person to person currently dominate almost 80% of the payment, and
Wow.
P2P is only 20%. But the real growth, Sakshi, will come from P2M.
Yeah.
If the credit card POS machine today, we have some 6 million POS machines. But if you look at QR code, we already have 13 million QR codes. So the real big growth will come from P2M, segment. Second, even the corporate payment today, most of the corporates, payments are through NEFT, RTGS. Again, the next phase of growth tomorrow, maybe we'll see, UPI use cases on the corporate side. So again,
Yes.
second big growth driver will be the corporate payments. Third, RBI recently talked about linking, credit card with UPI. Now, despite credit cards being in, for decades here, and 7 lakh or 8 lakh crore of total transaction, UPI will tomorrow the major expansion of will happen on the credit side.
Still, there are some issues which are long-standing issues. There's this vexed issue of zero merchant discount rate on UPI transactions. The industry is asking for a reasonable MDR to be put. Where do we stand on this? And, what can consumers be prepared for in future?
So currently, all UPI transaction is a zero MDR. I mean,
Yeah.
nobody pays any MDR on UPI transaction. But the kind of infrastructure, this payment gateway player, in the payment aggregator, and even the banks have built, for UPI success, we need a reasonable MDR, going forward.
So is cashless economy still far away? What are you gauging here?
I agree, Sakshi. If we look at cash to GDP is, I think it's more than 14% of the GDP, and even the pre-demon, it was around 12.5 or less than 12%. So yes, cash is a big issue. But the way I look
Yeah.
at it, you see today, in the last 2 years, we have seen a lot of infusion of
Sure.
money because of relaxed monetary policy. But the denominator, if you see, the GDP remained the same. I mean, we were some 145 lakh crore in 1920. Even now, we are around 147 lakh crore in terms of real GDP. So denominator in a way hasn't changed much, but we, on the denominator side, a lot of cash, came in. That's the, one big reason, the way I see it. And second, the way we look at cash in the economy, because cash takes some 6-7 turns in the economy, and then, finally we see this figure of, GDP.
Sure.
But I agree on the e-commerce side, we have seen a lot of conversion, of cash into digital. But there's a huge lot of other economy where we are yet to see, this
Yeah.
digitized cash and other things.
Hopefully, that'll be all very, very soon and exciting to read your piece in the magazine as well. Let's now go across to Binu. Binu, your story on the e-commerce big shake-up. Since we're talking about the e-commerce space right here, it just comes very, very naturally to you as to what's really happening in this space. On the one hand, we are seeing that the transactions still majorly happening in cash, but there are other things that are happening that could entirely change the way e-commerce we deal with e-commerce on an everyday basis. We are talking about this open network for digital commerce as well. Help all our viewers really understand what this is going to do, and although on the one hand it aims to create an open, inclusive, competitive marketplace for both sellers and buyers, but how will it really work?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, this is a very promising, platform or a network that the government has initiated. So ONDC, as you know, is built on an open source structure. It uses open specifications. It's an open network protocol. So it is independent of any specific platform. So on the contrary, if you look at the marketplaces, the search results there are skewed towards brands that give them the highest advertising money, or that gives them the most orders. So in that way, discoverability is a huge concern for small sellers. So that
Mm,
is where ONDC comes in. ONDC, because it's a open network protocol, it will enable all sellers across categories, across segments, to be discovered across buyer apps, be it Paytm, be it Kotak, be it PhonePe or Snapdeal. Any buyer app that has joined, partnered with the network, will showcase all the sellers that are on the platform. That way, the
right.
discoverability issue is kind of sorted. Then comes the commission rates. The outrageous commission rates on marketplaces, or let's say food delivery platforms, is a huge concern. It is causing huge stress on small sellers and restaurants and such partners for marketplaces. So here in ONDC, the commission rates are set, or at least is expected to be in the range of 10 to 15%. Whereas on a marketplace or a food delivery platform, it's about let's say 25 to 40%. So that is a huge relief for smaller brands. And
Yeah.
when you look at users too, users don't have to depend on a particular e-commerce marketplace or a food delivery platform, or for that case, in any one particular network or platform. Here they can access the whole network through any app that has partnered with ONDC, be it their social media website, be it their banking website, be it any other
Right.
mobile app that has
Right.
joined ONDC platform as a buyer app.
There's one more point that I wanted to ask you about the e-commerce penetration in India. Now, that was a primary objective with which ONDC is being formed, but how will it really achieve that?
See, ONDC on the other side works with seller apps, right? So they have tied up with a whole lot of seller apps. They're still onboarding a lot of seller apps. So these seller apps are, aggregators who will play a massive role in expanding the e-commerce penetration in India, and they hope this will work out. For example, around 200 seller apps that ONDC is in conversations with, and
Mm,
they are now 50 in 50 cities, piloting in 50 cities. And when large aggregators like Snapdeal comes on board, Snapdeal is in the final leg of of being onboarded. So when Snapdeal comes in, they will bring at least 2,500 sellers on board at once. So
mm,
when such large aggregators come on board, be it Microsoft or many other seller apps, large entities like Soho and all are being onboarded now. So when these large aggregators come on board, the hockey stick growth will kick in, and then it will be a very faster growth. That's the hope of ONDC.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Binu, for all that update. Let me go across to Rajat now, who again has done a very, very important story that all of us are grappling with to understand where is the Indian economy headed from here as we have come out of the worst of the COVID-19 pandemic. We hear there is a recovery, but perhaps it is an uneasy one. Rajat, so help us really understand.
So, Sakshi, thank you for having me this time. So, the story that we did in this edition of the Business Today magazine
Yeah,
talks about that we are constantly hearing that India is one of the fastest growing economy, one of the bright spot across the global
yeah.
economies, and even Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said so while having discussion about inflation in the last session of
Sure.
Parliament. And all rating agencies are also saying the same. But through
Hmm.
this story, we spoke to a lot of all renowned economists we spoke to two RBI governors, C. Rangarajan, D. Subbarao, former Vice
Yeah.
Chairman Niti Aayog, and we tried to gauge, even in the backdrop of one of the fastest growing economy, what are the various alarm bells and the challenges that the
Hmm.
Indian economy is grappling with.
Hmm.
So all economists sort of agreed on one point that one of the major challenge for the Indian economy as of now is to generate jobs. So the big
Yeah.
concern is the jobless growth that we are having as of now. For example, former Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog, Rajiv Kumar, talked about the big concern of a falling labor force participation rate, which is somewhere around 40%. So also, and one of the economists who is a professor of economics at University of Massachusetts said that this
Hmm.
jobless growth is a ticking atom bomb from the country, and we
Yeah.
need to address it immediately. So one
Yeah.
challenge is of a jobless growth. Second, obviously, is exports. And I would like to
Hmm.
tell you, Sakshi, that the 50% of, like, almost half of the GDP growth came from
Hmm.
exports last year. But due to the
Yes.
recessionary fear in the developed economies and the subdued demand, there is a fear that export growth will not be similar as it was last year. And just to put in
Yes.
perspective, last year we had an export growth, exports of over $420 billion, which was an all-time high. So this year it's going to be very challenging for Indian economy to have that kind of export growth. So the second big challenge is of exports. Third big challenge that we talked about in the story is the widening of deficit and the
Yes.
widening of
Yes.
current account deficit.
Hmm.
So just to make you aware, in July we had a trade deficit of somewhere around $30 billion, which is also very high. Current account
Yes.
deficit, according to the estimates, is this fiscal we are going to have a current account deficit of somewhere around 3.5% of GDP, which is very high.
Hmm.
And last year we ended up with 1.2% of GDP as a current account deficit. So these are the
Correct.
big challenges. Obviously, inflation is also one of the challenges. We saw that inflation moderating to somewhere around 6%. Now again, it's rearing its head again. And the last inflation print that we saw was of
Hmm.
7%. So these
7%.
are the big challenges that we talked about in the story.
Absolutely. So the challenges are many, which we will have to tackle. But there's one thing that I also mentioned that, there is world over this chatter about if there could be a slowdown or a recession in US and European economies. And if that happens, then is that going to be exacerbating the challenge for us in India on all of these fronts that you just talked about?
Exactly, you're right. So when we are talking about the export growth as a challenge, that means that the recessionary fear that is hovering over the developed economies, that is going to our export growth, right? With the rising interest rate, we are also seeing that capital outflows are happening at a record levels at this point of time because of the recessionary fears, rising interest rates, strengthening dollar, and all these things. So obviously, the recessionary fear is percolating down into the every aspect of the economy, and challenge of export growth is one amongst them.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Rajat, for being with us and sharing all those thoughts right there. Thanks to you and thanks to Binu and to Anand as well for sharing all those insights as to what can we really expect in this upcoming issue. I can safely say it's going to be an extremely insightful fun to go out there on the stands to grab your copies of this new edition of Business Today magazine. I'm sure it's going to be giving you a whole lot of insights about what are we going to be headed for in the next half hour, a half year or so. Thanks a lot.
It's If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.